My family planned a cultural trip, but they lured me abroad to force an arranged marriage I never agreed to. So I played a tape that left them shaken. I'm Alex, a 27-year-old man, and a few months ago, my parents sprung a surprise on me. They announced that we were taking a family trip to their home country. At first, it seemed like a nice idea. They always talked about how we needed to visit, reconnect with our culture, and spend time with relatives we hadn't seen in years. But something about the way they presented it felt off. For one, my parents are not the type to plan extravagant trips. They're practical, careful with money, and usually make a big deal out of spending on anything beyond necessities. Yet suddenly, they were insisting on covering all expenses, flights, hotels, everything. They framed it as a long overdue visit, but the urgency in their tone made it sound like something more than just a casual family vacation. I wasn't exactly thrilled about taking time off work, and I had other commitments, but they pushed hard. My mother, in particular, kept emphasizing how it would mean so much to our extended family. It's once in a lifetime, she kept saying. My younger sister, who's 24 years old, jumped in, urging me to come along. It got to a point where saying no felt like betraying some kind of unspoken family duty. Even as I reluctantly agreed, something nagged at me. Anytime I asked for details about the itinerary, where we'd be staying, what the plan was, my parents dodged the question. Don't worry, they'd say. Everything is taken care of. But there were no flight confirmations, no hotel bookings in sight. The vagueness only made me more suspicious. Then the weirdness started ramping up. Out of nowhere, distant relatives from my parents' home country began reaching out. People I barely knew were suddenly interested in my life, asking about my job, my future plans, and oddly enough, my relationship status. My aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in years, messaged me, saying she was excited to see me finally settle down. I had no idea what that meant. One evening, my mother let something slip while preparing dinner. She casually mentioned that she and my father had a small favor to ask of me while we were there. I pressed her on it, but she just laughed it off and said it was nothing to worry about. I knew better. My mother never brought things up unless they were important. Then my father started bringing up an old family friend. He spoke about the man with admiration, reminiscing about their bond from decades ago. It was strange because I had never heard of this person before, yet suddenly he was apparently someone deeply tied to our family. He's done so much for us, my father kept saying. It'll be nice for you to meet his family. At the same time, my parents' behavior toward me changed drastically. They started treating me differently, cooking my favorite meals, praising me more than usual, even buying me new clothes. It felt like they were buttering me up, which only made me more uneasy. Then came the biggest red flag. A cousin from my parents' home country tagged me in a post. It was a picture of a traditional celebration with the caption, "Can't wait for the big day. #family traditions." I didn't recognize most of the people in the picture, but one thing stood out. A young woman I had never seen before was right in the center of it. The comments were even stranger, filled with relatives excitedly talking about an upcoming event. I had no idea what they were referring to. By the time we landed in my parents' home country, I was already on edge. The moment we arrived, something felt off. Everyone was a little too excited to see me. The greetings were over the top, and the conversations were filled with cryptic remarks about big plans. The first night, we had a huge welcome dinner. It wasn't just family. There were neighbors, old friends, even people I barely knew. It didn't feel like a casual gathering. It felt like an event. The attention was all on me, like I was the guest of honor for something I hadn't signed up for. Then came the introduction. In the middle of the dinner, my parents brought me over to meet someone, Aisha. She was my age, polite, and clearly had no idea what was going on either. But the way everyone watched us, the subtle smiles, the approving nods, it was obvious they were pushing us together. The entire night, conversation after conversation circled back to how compatible we were. A cousin of mine brought up how Aisha and I had so much in common. An aunt hinted that it was about time I found someone. It wasn't subtle. Then, the moment that changed everything, one of my uncles, grinning from ear to ear, leaned in and asked, "So, when is the engagement?" I froze. I turned to my parents, expecting them to laugh it off, to correct him, to say that nothing like that was happening. But they didn't. They just smiled. That's when I knew I had walked into a setup. I pulled my parents aside immediately, demanding to know what was going on. They tried to brush it off, saying it was just a suggestion, just an idea, but their nervous smiles, the way they avoided my eyes, told me the truth. They hadn't planned a family trip. They had planned my engagement. As soon as I pulled my parents aside, my sister found me. She had been quiet the entire evening, but her expression told me she already knew what was going on. Away from the crowd, she confirmed my worst fear. This trip had never been about reconnecting with family. She had overheard our parents discussing finalizing my engagement with Aisha's family. This wasn't a casual introduction. It was an arranged marriage, planned behind my back. Before I could fully process that, I needed to talk to Aisha. It wasn't easy with everyone watching us like we were already a couple, but eventually, I managed to get a moment alone with her. The second we were out of earshot, she let out a nervous breath and admitted she had no idea things were this serious either. Her parents had only told her she would be meeting a good prospect, someone they thought would be a great match. No one mentioned that an engagement was already in motion. Neither of us had agreed to this, yet here we were, surrounded by relatives treating this as a foregone conclusion. As soon as we rejoined the gathering, the emotional manipulation started. My parents pulled me aside again, this time with softer voices, warmer smiles. They didn't demand anything outright, but they didn't need to. They spoke about tradition, about how this was the way things had always been done. They reminded me how lucky I was to have parents who cared enough to find a good match. They asked if I really wanted to disappoint everyone who had gathered for this moment. The choice, they claimed, was mine, but their words and the weight of the crowd watching my every move told a different story. It wasn't just my parents either. Aisha's father approached me, speaking highly of my family, praising my upbringing, saying that a match like this was rare. He spoke in a way that made it clear this wasn't a proposal, it was an expectation. My sister found me again, this time away from the noise. She wasn't part of this plan, and she made it clear she would support whatever decision I made. But she also warned me. Our parents weren't going to let me walk away from this easily. I decided to check my travel arrangements, suspecting that leaving early might be the only way out. That's when I realized my parents had booked my return flight under their reservation. I had no control over my ticket. If I wanted to leave, I would need their approval to change the date. It got worse. I overheard relatives talking about the upcoming engagement party. Guests had already been invited. The decorations, the venue, everything had been arranged, and no one had even bothered to ask me. Later, Aisha found me again, but this time, she was careful. We were standing in a room full of people, but as she passed by, she discreetly slipped me a small piece of paper. In the briefest whisper, she said, "We need to talk later." By the time dinner rolled around, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let myself be trapped in a situation I had no control over. I decided I would tell my parents, in front of everyone if necessary, that I was not going through with this. But before I could say a word, my father stood up. He clinked his glass, smiled at the crowd, and announced, "We are happy to welcome Aisha into our family." The room erupted in applause. I sat frozen in my seat. They had already decided for me. As soon as the applause died down and people turned their attention elsewhere, I slipped away from the gathering. I kept my head down, weaving through the crowd until I reached the back of the house. Aisha was already waiting for me. She stood near the door, shifting uncomfortably, glancing around to make sure no one saw us. The moment we were alone, she wasted no time. She had been trying to piece things together too, and had overheard her parents talking earlier. This wasn't something they had just decided in the last few weeks. Our families had been planning this for over a year. Quiet discussions, arrangements made without our knowledge, all leading up to this trip. They never intended to ask us. They just assumed we would go along with it. I told her I wasn't going through with this. She nodded immediately. She wanted out too, but neither of us had a plan. I stepped outside to make a call. My best friend back home picked up after a few rings. I explained everything quickly, telling him I needed a way out. He didn't hesitate. He said he'd book me a flight and send me the details. I just needed to get to the airport. Then the real problem hit me, my passport. My parents had taken all our important documents and locked them in their hotel safe. There was no way I was getting on a plane without it. When I got back inside, my sister was nowhere to be found. She had been supportive earlier, but now she was avoiding me. That didn't sit right. I kept moving through the house, looking for her, until I finally heard her voice from one of the rooms. She was talking to our parents. She wasn't on my side anymore. She was telling them I needed to stop resisting, that I was just being difficult, that once I calmed down, I would see this was the right thing. My mother agreed, saying that I was just overwhelmed and would come around. My father sounded confident. He believed that if they kept me close, I wouldn't have a choice. I backed away before they noticed me listening. For the next day, they made sure I was never alone. Everywhere I went, someone was there, a relative, a cousin, my parents, always steering me toward Aisha. They arranged outings, casual gatherings that felt anything but casual. The pressure didn't ease, if anything, it got worse. Aisha wasn't spared either. Her mother sat her down that afternoon, making it clear that rejecting me wouldn't just mean saying no to marriage. It would mean damaging her reputation. If she refused now, it would make it harder for her to find another match. Aisha barely spoke after that. I told my parents I needed more time to think. They believed me. It bought me a little breathing room, just enough to figure out my next move. Later that night, Aisha managed to slip me a message. Her cousin was willing to help her escape if things got worse. She was ready to run if she had to. That sealed it. I wasn't waiting anymore. The problem was my passport. Without it, I was stuck. I came up with a plan. I waited until my parents were in their room, then knocked on their door. I acted frantic, telling them I had lost something important. My mother panicked immediately, offering to help me search for it. My father went to check the drawers. That gave me the moment I needed. While they were distracted, I pretended to help search through drawers, keeping an eye on my father. I had overheard him saying the code earlier in the week when he was securing his wallet. I quickly punched it in, grabbed my passport, and shoved it into my pocket before they turned around. I left the room as quickly as I could, my heart pounding as I stepped out into the hallway. One of my cousins approached me. He was younger, someone I barely spoke to, but he looked around quickly before slipping something into my hand, a wad of cash. He leaned in, whispering just 2 words, "Get out." Then he walked away like nothing happened. I wasted no time. I found a quiet spot, called my best friend, and asked him to book a flight in my name. Since my parents had booked my original return under their reservation, I needed a separate ticket to leave. Then I grabbed my bag and left. The second I stepped outside, my heart was racing. I kept my head down, moving quickly through the streets. I didn't call for a taxi until I was a few blocks away. When the car finally arrived, I got in and told the driver to take me straight to the airport. For a few minutes, I thought I had done it. Then I saw them. My parents were already at the airport. They were waiting for me. They'd been tracking my phone. I barely had time to react before my mother ran toward me. She grabbed my arm, sobbing, causing a scene. People turned to watch. Security guards took notice. She cried loudly, saying I was making a mistake, saying I was breaking our family apart. My father stood a few feet away, silent but seething. Then he spoke. "If you leave now," he said, his voice cold, "you are no longer our son." I barely heard him. I looked at Aisha, standing frozen near the entrance. She wasn't even part of this argument, but her expression said everything. She was terrified. She was stuck. If I backed down now, neither of us was getting out. I took a step back. My mother tightened her grip. I grabbed my bag, turned away, and ran. My mother screamed behind me. My father called my name, but I didn't stop. I kept going, moving faster, pushing through the crowd, past the security line. I didn't look back. The moment I boarded my flight, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. They must have been using new numbers, fake accounts, or having other relatives reach out since I had already blocked their primary contacts. At first, the messages were emotional, begging me to come back, insisting that I was making a mistake. Then the tone changed. My father's messages became cold, then outright threatening. He warned me that if I didn't return, I would be cut off from the family for good. I ignored it all. I turned off my phone before takeoff. But even as the plane lifted into the air, I couldn't stop thinking about Aisha. I had no idea if she had managed to escape or if she was still trapped. She hadn't responded to my last message, and the thought of leaving her behind gnawed at me. There was nothing I could do until I landed. When I finally arrived back home, I turned my phone on again. No messages from Aisha. No response from my sister either. I called her once, then twice. Nothing. If she wasn't answering, I had my answer. She was with them. She had chosen their side. I barely had time to process that before the next blow hit. I checked my bank account. My parents had frozen the joint account I still had with them, the one I had used occasionally for family expenses. My personal savings were untouched, but everything tied to them was gone. Then I reached my apartment. My landlord informed me that my parents, who had co-signed the lease, had formally withdrawn their financial backing. While they couldn't evict me immediately, I knew I had limited time to make alternate arrangements. I wasn't even inside yet when my boss called. He asked me to come into the office immediately. I didn't need to guess why. The moment I walked into his office, he shut the door and handed me a file. My parents had contacted my company, claiming I was in a mental health crisis and needed to be put on an indefinite leave of absence. They had tried to interfere with my job. HR hadn't believed them, my boss told me. He knew something personal was happening but assured me my position was safe. Still, the fact that they had gone that far, it rattled me. I knew what I had to do next. I made an appointment with a lawyer. I wasn't going to wait for them to try something else. I wanted to make sure my finances were secure, my lease situation handled, and that there was no way my parents could interfere with my life any further. That night, I finally got the message I had been waiting for. A single text from Aisha. I got out, staying with a cousin. My parents are furious. That was it, but it was enough. She was safe. Some relatives quietly reached out to me after that. An uncle, a few cousins. They didn't say much, but their messages were clear. They supported me, even if they couldn't say so publicly. But not everyone felt that way. One of my aunts called, leaving a long voicemail about how I had broken my mother's heart, how she wasn't eating or sleeping, how I had ruined her health. Another relative accused me of bringing shame to the family, that I had been too influenced by Western ideas and had forgotten where I came from. I ignored all of it. Then my parents showed up at my apartment. They didn't call first. They just arrived, knocking at my door over and over until I finally answered. My mother was crying. My father looked exhausted but angry. They told me I needed to fix this, that the shame I had brought on the family could still be undone if I just did the right thing. My mother begged. My father accused me of being selfish. I stood there listening. I let them say everything they wanted to say. Then, when they were done, I simply told them, no. That was when my father said it. If you don't fix this, you are no longer our son. My mother wiped her tears and whispered, you will regret this when we are gone. I didn't say a word. I just shut the door. As I stood in my near-empty apartment, with an eviction notice hanging over my head and my phone still buzzing with messages I wouldn't answer, one thing became clear. I had lost my family, but I had gained my freedom. A few days after shutting the door on my parents for good, Aisha called. Her voice was unsteady, and I could hear shouting in the background. Her father had just told her that she was officially disowned. According to him, she had dishonored the family beyond repair. Her mother refused to speak to her. Her younger siblings had been told she was a disgrace. Her extended family wasn't any better. The news had spread quickly, and people she barely knew were messaging her, telling her how much shame she had brought to her parents. Some relatives went as far as to say she was cursed for refusing the engagement. Meanwhile, my parents weren't staying quiet either. Word got around that I had been brainwashed by bad influences, that I had rejected my family's values to follow a selfish Western mindset. They painted me as the lost son who had betrayed his own blood. It didn't take long before the threats started. Distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years, started reaching out. Some were subtle, saying I had made a terrible mistake and should think carefully before cutting my family off. Others weren't as polite. One message called me a disgrace. Another warned me that, no matter where I went, I would always be known as the son who humiliated his parents. Then my sister finally responded. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a sign of support. It was a single message. You should have just gone through with it. Was it really worth destroying our family over this? That was when it became clear she had never been on my side. Maybe at one point she had hesitated, but in the end, she had chosen them. Aisha's family wasted no time trying to erase what had happened. A cousin of hers messaged her, letting her know that her parents were already looking for another husband for her. It was as if she were a transaction, something they could trade away to restore their pride. Then came the full fallout. We were both completely blacklisted from family gatherings. Religious events that I had once been expected to attend now excluded my name entirely. Relatives who used to smile and greet me acted as though I never existed. Aisha had it even worse. Her name was spoken like a curse in her own community. Despite everything, she refused to break. She told me she wasn't going to wait around for their approval. She wanted a new life, one without their control. She started applying for jobs in a different city, determined to get out for good. Then my mother found another way to reach me, a different number, a different tactic. This time, she was crying. She told me she forgave me, that all I had to do was apologize, come back, and everything would go back to the way it was. The engagement could be fixed. The shame could be undone. I didn't entertain the conversation. I hung up. That was when my father took things to the next level. He started telling mutual friends that I was dead to him unless I repented. He made sure everyone knew that I was no longer considered part of the family. Then my lawyer called. My parents were trying to legally distance themselves from me, ensuring I had no financial ties left to them. It was clear they were making a final attempt at control rather than any practical legal move. I had never counted on that money, but the message was clear. This was their final punishment. And it wasn't just my parents anymore. The community had picked up their anger and spread it further. Random numbers started messaging me, strangers telling me I had turned my back on my culture, that I had shamed my family beyond repair. Through it all, Aisha stood strong. She had lost everything too, but she didn't let it break her. She started taking courses, applying for new jobs, moving forward. As for me, I knew there was no going back. My family, my financial security, my entire cultural foundation, it was all gone. But I refused to be controlled. A few days after my parents' final visit, I was starting to feel like I could breathe again. The silence from them was unsettling, but I wasn't naive enough to believe they had given up. I had cut them off, blocked every number they used, and made sure my lawyer was handling the inheritance dispute. There was nothing left for them to take from me, or so I thought. Then a relative showed up at my door. I had never given anyone my new address. I had moved out of my apartment as soon as my parents revoked their support, found a smaller place, and kept my location private. But somehow, they had found me. The man standing outside wasn't one of my parents, but he was close enough, an uncle who had always been my father's right hand. He wasn't here for a friendly chat. He made it clear I had one last chance to fix things before it was too late. That was when I knew. I confronted my sister. It didn't take long to get the truth. She had given them my address. She tried to justify it, claiming she was trying to help me, that I would regret this one day, that she was only doing what was best for our family. It was the same script my parents had used, the same manipulation, just in a different voice. That was it. She was no longer my sister. I blocked her on everything. The next call came from Aisha. She was panicked. Her parents had gone to the police. They had filed a false report claiming she had been kidnapped by an outside influence. They didn't say my name directly, but it was obvious who they were referring to. Her cousin acted fast, helping her relocate before her parents could track her down. She went completely off the grid. New address, new phone number, no digital footprint. She knew the only way to be free was to disappear. Meanwhile, my parents weren't done with me either. I received a letter from my father's lawyer. They were moving to legally remove me from any remaining shared family assets. I wasn't surprised. This was their final attempt at punishing me, at making sure I had nothing left. Aisha's family wasn't backing down either. Her cousin told her that her father was still trying to arrange a marriage for her, acting as if she was just another problem to be solved. He was desperate to erase the shame she had brought upon them. Then the call came. Aisha told me she was leaving for good. A friend had secured her a job abroad. It was her way out, her chance to build a life where her parents couldn't reach her. She refused to risk being dragged back. She asked for one last favor. I drove her to the airport that night. We barely spoke on the way there. There wasn't much left to say. She was choosing freedom, just like I had, and I couldn't blame her. As we reached the terminal, she turned to me, eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Gratitude, sadness, maybe both. But she didn't cry. She had already made her peace with this. She thanked me, not just for driving her there, but for everything. And then she was gone. The next morning, the smear campaign started. My father told everyone that I was responsible for Aisha running away. He spread it to every relative, every family friend, anyone who would listen. I was permanently shunned. Former family friends refused to acknowledge me. I was completely outcast. But then my lawyer called. There was good news. He had secured access to the funds my parents had frozen in the joint account. They had tried to take everything from me, but they failed. I had just enough to keep myself stable while I figured out my next steps. For the first time in my life, I had no obligations, no expectations, no manipulation. That night, before boarding her flight, Aisha sent one final message. "Thank you. You saved my life." I sat alone in my apartment, knowing I had lost everything. But for the first time, my future was mine. A few days after Aisha's flight, I tried checking in on her, but when I searched for her social media, everything was gone. No posts, no updates, nothing. At first, I thought she had just wiped her accounts for privacy, but then her cousin reached out. Aisha had received a threatening message from an unknown number. It warned her that she would regret running away. Shortly after that, she deactivated everything and went completely silent. Then, things took another turn. A CO worker pulled me aside at work, looking uncomfortable. Someone had called HR, claiming to be a concerned relative. The caller had asked if I had been acting unstable lately. Questioning whether I was fit to continue working, HR had immediately shut it down, but my CO worker recognized the voice. It was my aunt. She had tried to sabotage my job. That same night, I got an email from my father. The message was short and carefully worded. He said they would forgive me if I apologized and agreed to meet with a respected elder to fix things. He made it sound like a peace offering, but I knew better. This wasn't about forgiveness, it was about control. Then I got the call from Aisha. She was panicked. Her father had hired someone to follow her. She noticed the same man near her apartment and outside a coffee shop she had visited. When she confronted him, He asked her if she had thought things through and suggested she call her family before making any permanent decisions. It was a warning. They weren't trying to bring her home with force, not yet, but they wanted her to know they were watching. Enough was enough. We consulted a lawyer. The threats were indirect, but the pattern was clear. We were advised to document everything, calls, messages, encounters, and prepare to file restraining orders if things escalated. Then I got another call, this time from a supposed family mediator. He claimed he wanted to discuss the situation in a neutral setting, saying he could help bridge the gap between me and my parents. I was immediately suspicious, but agreed, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I wanted to see exactly what they were planning. When I arrived at the meeting, I knew I had walked into a setup. Inside the small office, my parents were waiting, along with my uncle and a religious leader I had never met before. The second I sat down, the pressure started. The religious leader spoke first, telling me I had caused my family great pain, that my actions were creating spiritual harm, and that I was on a dangerous path. He warned me that misfortune follows those who abandon their family's traditions, that my choices would bring me regret. Then my father took over. He didn't ask me to come back, he demanded it. My uncle chimed in, making it clear that I still had a chance to undo the damage I had done. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply stood up and left. As I walked out, my father yelled after me, calling me a disgrace. People turned to watch, but I didn't stop. I didn't give them the reaction they wanted. That night, I blocked them all, my parents, my uncle, every toxic family member that had tried to control me. But it wasn't over yet. Aisha's cousin messaged me a few days later. Aisha had barely avoided a confrontation outside her workplace. Two unknown men had been waiting for her, pretending to be customers. Her cousin had picked her up just in time. They weren't just watching her anymore, they were trying to bring her back. We officially filed for restraining orders. Then my sister reached out. It was one last message, blaming me for destroying the family's honor. She told me I had ruined everything. I blocked her permanently. A distant cousin discreetly warned me there was talk of legal action. Aisha's family might try to force her return through the courts, claiming she had been manipulated or coerced. She didn't wait to find out. I helped her finalize her escape. A few days later, she boarded a flight. No more messages, no more threats. She was gone for good. A week after Aisha's departure, my boss called me into a meeting. The look on his face told me it wasn't just a routine check-in. Someone had filed a formal complaint against me, accusing me of unethical behavior at work. The details were vague, but the accusation claimed I had engaged in dishonest business practices and was creating a hostile work environment. The complaint wasn't from a CO worker. It came from someone outside the company, a distant family friend who had always been loyal to my parents. My boss had already been skeptical of the claim, but HR still had to investigate. I presented everything I had, proof of harassment, the repeated attempts my family had made to ruin my life, even the previous incident where my aunt had tried to sabotage my job. HR took one look at the evidence and dismissed the complaint. The damage control worked, but it was clear my parents weren't done trying to break me. A few days later, I received a letter stating that I had been removed from the family insurance plan. Then my lawyer called. My parents were making another move, this time trying to revoke my rights to a shared family trust. They were claiming that I had been financially dependent on them and that I had no rightful claim to any remaining assets. It was a weak argument, but they were throwing everything they could at me. That night, I got one last message from Aisha. She had settled into her new home. For the first time in her life, she was free. She thanked me again and then disappeared for good. Meanwhile, my lawyer kept fighting on my behalf. The trust had legal conditions that prevented my parents from cutting me off completely, but they were doing everything they could to delay my access to it. The case wasn't over yet. Then something unexpected happened. A distant uncle reached out. He had remained neutral this entire time, never taking a side, but now he wanted to talk. He told me that the family was more divided than I thought. Some relatives believed my parents had gone too far. Others thought I had done the right thing. They weren't speaking up publicly, but not everyone had turned against me. Then I got news about Aisha's father. A cousin told me that he was furious. He had lost control of his daughter, and in his mind, I was to blame. He had spent years shaping her future, making decisions on her behalf, and now she was gone, out of his reach forever. His anger had turned into desperation, and people in the community were starting to notice. That's when the shift happened. A few respected elders, ones my parents had hoped would shame me into submission, started speaking out against them. They criticized how they had handled the situation. They didn't outright defend me, but they made it clear that my parents had gone too far. Then came my mother's final move. She sent me a letter, a handwritten one. She told me she would never forgive me, that I had destroyed my family, that I had broken her heart. But at the end, she added something else. She said she hoped that one day I would realize what I had done, that I would regret my actions. I read it once, then put it away. I didn't respond. I knew what I had to do next. I relocated to a new city, far enough that no one could show up at my door again. I cut every last tie that could be used against me. Then my lawyer called with the final update. We had won. My father's attempts to block me from the trust had failed. The legal conditions were airtight, and he couldn't touch my portion. I had financial security. Aisha's cousin sent one last update. Her father's influence was crumbling. His desperate attempts to control her had cost him respect in the community. His name, once powerful, was now associated with failure. Aisha made her final move. She legally changed her last name. Her family would never be able to track her again. Before leaving for good, I visited my childhood home one last time. I stood outside looking at the place where I had spent years living under their expectations. But instead of sadness, all I felt was relief. I packed my bags and left, ready to start fresh, this time on my own terms. Months passed in silence. No more messages, no unexpected visits, no new schemes. For the first time in my life, I was living without my family's shadow looming over me. I had relocated, secured my financial independence, and finally started building a life on my own terms. Then, out of nowhere, an unknown number called. I let it ring. Then another call came in, and another. I ignored them all. Later that day, a cousin messaged me. My father had caused a scene at a family gathering. He had an outburst in front of everyone, yelling that I had ruined his life, that he had given me everything and I had thrown it all away. He blamed me for his misfortunes, for the way people now viewed our family, for the way the community had started turning against him. It wasn't just him. My parents' reputation had taken a hit. After everything they had done, publicly disowning me, making false accusations, dragging the family's name through the mud, people started questioning them instead. Respected elders distanced themselves, no longer rushing to defend them. Relatives who once whispered about me in disappointment were now whispering about them. Then my sister reached out, her first message in months. Not an apology, not even an attempt to reconnect, just one demand: fix things with our parents. I didn't respond. A few days later, I heard another update. Aisha's family was still looking for her. They had tried to track her down again, hoping to drag her back under their control, but she had planned ahead. She had cut all ties, changed her last name, built a life they could never reach. They weren't going to find her. Then something unexpected happened. The same uncle who had quietly supported me reached out again, this time not with words of encouragement, but with an opportunity. He wanted to invest in a new business venture and offered me a stake, a fresh start, a way to build something for myself, something that was entirely mine. While I was moving forward, my parents were still trying to claw their way back. They hosted a gathering trying to salvage their reputation. It didn't go as planned. Instead of regaining sympathy, people openly criticized them. Some questioned why they had gone to such extremes to control me. Others pointed out that they had lost both their children. One had fled the country, and the other had cut them off completely. The narrative had shifted. Then Aisha sent me a message, a single picture of a small house, freshly furnished, a new life. With it, a short text: "We really did it. We won." I felt nothing but pride for her, but my family wasn't done yet. A week later, my sister tried one last tactic. She claimed our mother was seriously ill, that if I had even a shred of humanity left, I would come home. I didn't engage. Then my father made his final attempt. He sent a letter, not to me but to my workplace, a direct appeal, trying to get past every block I had set up. My boss read it, then threw it out. I knew what I had to do next. I blocked my sister permanently. Any last thread that connected me to my family was gone. Then I made it official. I legally changed my last name. No more ties, no more legacy, no more weight of a family that had only seen me as a pawn in their game. I moved into a new apartment, focused on my work, and looked toward the future. Then the ultimate irony. A distant cousin sent me one last update. My parents, the same people who had disowned me, who had tried to ruin me, were now the ones begging for my forgiveness. They had lost everything. As I sat in my new home, with no obligations, no expectations, and no family chains holding me back, I finally felt at peace. No regrets. Choosing freedom was the best decision I had ever made.